Simón Bolívar was not born into revolution, but he was born into a world that was already beginning to crumble. He entered the world in 1783 in Caracas, Venezuela, a city perched between the colonial wealth of the Americas and the growing storms of rebellion. His family was aristocratic, wealthy, land-owning Creoles of Spanish descent. But Bolívar would spend his life turning against the very system that gave him privilege. He was orphaned young. By the age of 9, he had lost both his parents. Raised by tutors, including a black enslaved man named Hipólito and a revolutionary-leaning teacher named Simón Rodriguez, Bolívar was shaped early by two powerful forces: grief and radical ideas. Those ideas only deepened when, as a teenager, he was sent to Europe. There, he studied Enlightenment philosophy, read Rousseau, admired Washington, and watched Napoleon rise to power. He witnessed firsthand what it meant for people to throw off the chains of monarchy and claim freedom for themselves. Standing in the coronation chamber as Napoleon placed the crown on his own head, Bolívar learned something essential. Power was not granted by God. It was seized by those bold enough to take it. He returned to Venezuela with a fire in his chest. The Spanish Empire ruled over most of Latin America like a parasite. Creoles were denied political power. Indigenous communities were crushed under forced tribute systems. Enslaved Africans were beaten into submission to fuel the sugar and silver trades. Bolívar saw a continent ready to erupt, and he was determined to be the spark. The revolution began in fits and starts. Bolívar joined early independence efforts in 1810, but they were crushed by Spanish loyalists. He fled to New Granada, now Colombia, regrouped, returned, and failed again. He was exiled, betrayed, chased. But each time he fell, he returned more determined, more strategic, more dangerous. He learned to move through mountains, across rivers, and over plains with his troops. He marched soldiers through the Andes in brutal conditions, ambushing Spanish forces where they least expected it. He forged alliances with indigenous fighters, black militias, and freedmen from across the Caribbean. He promised liberation not just from Spain, but from slavery, from colonialism, from centuries of silence. But Bolívar's revolution didn't survive on determination alone. It survived because of help from those who shared in the dream. One of the most critical allies was not another general but an island, Haiti. In 1815, after another failed rebellion, Bolívar fled to the island of Jamaica, where he wrote the now famous Jamaica Letter, a sweeping political vision that warned of the dangers of monarchy in the Americas and outlined his hopes for a unified sovereign Latin America. But the letter was more than just philosophy. It was a cry for help. And that help came from Haiti's president, Alexandre Pétion. Pétion, himself a revolutionary who had fought alongside Toussaint Louverture, offered Bolívar money, weapons, and safe haven, on one condition: that Bolívar commit to abolishing slavery wherever he succeeded. Bolívar agreed, and that agreement reshaped the map of South America. He returned to Venezuela with Haitian ships, Haitian soldiers, Haitian arms. The revolution reignited. One by one, Spanish strongholds collapsed: Caracas, Bogota, Quito, Lima, Sucre. 5 nations declared independence thanks to Bolívar's campaigns: Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and the newly created Bolivia, named in his honor. For a moment, it seemed as if his dream might come true: a grand, unified republic of Latin America stretching from the Caribbean to the southern Andes. Bolívar called it Gran Colombia, and he believed it could rival any empire in the world. But revolutions are messy and unity is fragile. The elites who had cheered independence began to pull away when Bolívar advocated for reforms that threatened their power. He tried to abolish slavery but met fierce resistance. He wanted to limit the Catholic Church's grip on politics and was called a heretic. He centralized power in an attempt to hold the republic together and was called a dictator. His own allies turned on him. Generals he once trusted led uprisings. Politicians who praised him in public plotted his assassination in secret. Even among the liberators, conflict brewed. He clashed with fellow revolutionary leaders like José de San Martín, whose vision for the southern half of the continent diverged from Bolívar's. They met once in Guayaquil in 1822, a closed-door meeting between two legends. No one knows exactly what was said, but after that meeting, San Martín resigned his command and left the continent. Bolívar stood alone at the top of a fractured mountain. In 1828, someone placed assassins in his palace. He narrowly escaped through a window. His lover, Manuela Sáenz, fought off the attackers and helped him flee. She was no passive bystander. Manuela had ridden into battle, written manifestos, and stood at Bolivar's side during the darkest hours of the revolution. He called her the liberator of the liberator. But by then, Bolivar was already a man unraveling. In just over a decade, he had gone from visionary general to exhausted statesman. He wrote bitterly about the region he had fought to free, calling the people ungovernable and the revolution doomed. He once said, "Those who serve a revolution plow the sea," meaning they work tirelessly but leave no trace. In 1830, Bolivar resigned from the presidency of Gran Colombia. The federation splintered, civil wars erupted, old colonial elites reasserted power under new names. Bolivar left Bogotá with a broken heart and worsening tuberculosis. He died later that year at the age of 47, alone and in exile, his body weak, but his legend just beginning. In death, Bolivar became myth. Statues were raised, cities renamed. His face was placed on currency, schools, plazas, and constitutions. Every country he touched claimed him. Venezuela called him father. Bolivia called him namesake. Colombia called him hero. But even as he was glorified, the deeper truth of Bolivar's life remained far more complicated and far more human. He was brilliant but proud, charismatic but ruthless. He freed nations but struggled to govern them. He spoke of liberty but ruled with emergency powers. He owned enslaved people but later fought to end slavery. He was a product of his time, but also far ahead of it. He believed Latin America could be a great united republic, a powerful federation like the United States. But he also knew the forces working against him: racism, classism, regionalism, greed. In the end, Bolivar didn't just fight Spanish armies. He fought centuries of division, mistrust, and trauma that still lingered from conquest. And yet, he remains a symbol not of failure, but of possibility. Because in a time when monarchy was unquestioned, Bolivar questioned it. When most people were resigned to the chains of empire, he broke them. When the odds were impossible, he found a way forward. His life was not just about what he achieved, but about what he dared to imagine. A Latin America ruled by its own people. A continent where freedom was not a gift from the crown, but a right carved by blood and sacrifice. That dream was never fully realized, but it was never fully lost. In every modern movement for justice, sovereignty, and dignity across the Americas, you can still hear echoes of Bolivar's voice. Not in speeches, in action, in defiance. In those who still believe that the future of Latin America does not belong to kings, empires, or colonizers, but to its people. Bolivar's bones now rest in Venezuela, reinterred in a national mausoleum. But his spirit travels with every migrant who crosses a border seeking freedom, with every protester who raises a fist against tyranny, with every student who believes that a better future is worth fighting for. Simón Bolívar was not a god. He was not a saint, but he was something more dangerous. He was a man who knew that history could be rewritten, and set out to do it. Not with permission, not with compromise, but with fire.